The year is 1984. The economy is booming. Millions of new jobs are being created. And the unemployment rate is going down. The great success of American dream was visible all around. And any sign of eventual collapse was nowhere to be seen. Malls all across the United States would not start dying just yet. This is also the year when a Norwegian synth-pop band released a song that will eventually become a huge hit in the US. The year is now 1985. On your way home from the mall in your family's Chevrolet Cavalier, a song comes on the radio. It's Take On Me by a-ha. As you're jamming, you think to yourself, dang, that bass sounds amazing. Well, that bass sound and countless other sounds that you hear in 80s pop were created using FM synth. And that synth continues to bless our ears for decades to come. So, what is FM synthesis? And who is this man behind it all? Digital FM synthesis was developed by John Chowning in the 1960s at Stanford University. His algorithm was licensed to Yamaha in 1973, and this led to the birth of the Yamaha DX7, which was widely used in 80s pop, for example, the bass in Take On Me. One of the main reasons for this synthesizer's success was the preset.
And everything had to have a piano sound, and everything, what's the bell sound? Does it look like bells? No, then why would it,
It is programmable, but it's way too complex, so people kept using presets. People describe analog synth as warm and buttery, and digital synth as cold and glassy. Digital FM synth is powerful because it can create complex sounds using only few oscillators, as we'll hear soon. Before we can cover FM synth, let's take a step back and learn about modulation and LFO. LFO stands for Low Frequency Oscillator. So, we have been using sine tone oscillators in previous videos. And we can take a frequency that is below 20 Hz, which humans cannot hear, and use it to modulate or affect the timbre of sounds. When we look at a sine tone's waveform, in a very simple term, it's essentially cycling between this highest peak and this lowest peak. So what does that mean in terms of synthesis? The best way to demonstrate what an LFO and modulation is to see and hear in action. Okay, I'm going to demonstrate it in Max MSP. We'll use noise as the sound source. And here we have an oscillator that is outputting a sine wave at 0.1 Hz, a very low frequency. As we discussed earlier, sine wave is cycling between the highest peak value and lowest peak value. So this sine tone oscillator right here is outputting numbers between and including -1.0 and +1.0 at a specific looping speed. And the speed of that can be controlled with the frequency parameter. Essentially, these values between -1.0 to +1.0 are the value of loudness level outputted by the sine tone. So, if we use that value and connect it to a gain object, which controls the loudness of a sound, it'll sound like this. How this gain object right here works is 0 is no sound, 0.5 is 50% loudness, and 1.0 is 100% loudness. And negative numbers work the same way. So that means as this LFO is outputting numbers between -1.0 to +1.0 and back and forth at a specific speed, the volume of the noise will go up and down at that specific speed. That's LFO in action. And if we increase the frequency value, we hear the volume go up and down at a faster rate. Cool. What we have done here is called an amplitude modulation, or AM synth. So AM synth is where the volume of one audio signal is controlled or modulated by the volume level of another signal. In our example, it was an LFO outputting -1.0 to +1.0 at a slow speed. Okay, now we can talk about frequency modulation. Similar to how one signal can affect another signal's amplitude or volume in amplitude modulation technique, frequency modulation means one signal's frequency is modulated by another signal. The oscillator that is affected is called a carrier, and the one changing the frequency of the carrier is called the modulator. One thing to note about FM synth is that instead of using the inaudible LFOs, we use audible frequencies, so anything above 20 Hz for the modulator. This is what it looks like in max. Carrier frequency controls the main overall pitch of the synth, and modulator affects the timbre, and depth controls how much modulation is happening. What's cool about FM synth is being able to create a rich sound even with just two oscillators. I'm mainly covering FM synth because we can create complex sound with few objects in pure data. So, it will be helpful to know a bit about it so that we can use this technique when we start building a physical electronic musical instrument. It's easy to prototype nice sounding synth using FM. So, as long as you get the general idea behind the concept, it'll be enough. The science and math behind FM synth can get complicated. And even the inventor himself, Dr. Chowning, admitted that FM synth was 100% an ear discovery, and he did not initially understood the math behind it. Okay, so that concludes our series of video on synthesis basics for now. We'll most likely continue with this series eventually, because we only scratched the surface of this amazing world of sound design. We didn't talk about wavetable, granular, effects, and other techniques yet. But we do know enough for now, and once we start building hardware electronic instruments, we have enough knowledge to sound design and prototype. After the modulation pure data video, we'll cover an overview of Arduino, which I'm very excited about. See you in the next class. Bye.